It's our world too. It's our world too.
Hi, I'm Robert Perala, and we're at Contact in the Desert right here in Joshua Tree, California, where we are at a conference looking at UFOs, extraterrestrials, the esoteric sciences, conspiracies, and even more. There's a vast array of information that is being imparted to the public that is startling and intelligent. And we caught up with Nick Redfern, who came all the way over here and wanted to share some information on his new book, Close Encounters of the Fatal Kind, in addition to The Real Men in Black, and also as much as really 28 other books and so much more. He's internationally acclaimed, been around a long time. I want to welcome you to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Well, thanks, Robert.
Good
thanks
to
a
see
lot. You too.
So you're from Walsall, England, which is near Birmingham.
Mm-hmm.
And very British, and you come over here to the United States exposing sort of myths, misconceptions, misunderstandings, but ultimately you're a truth seeker and an exposer of information. One of the things I think that's most interesting that people ask about the UFO conspiracy and cover-up is, why a cover-up? Why bother? Is it the culture? Is it because our belief systems are not quite in place? Can we handle it? Is it the executive branch?
I think it's actually several different things, and I'm not entirely sure that if the truth was exposed or revealed, that the fears that those who are keeping it secret have would actually come to pass. People may well be able to handle it. I mean, if we go back to the height of the Cold War, every day we all lived under the threat of nuclear war and complete wipeout. But we didn't sort of wake up every morning panicking and worrying about it. And even if there are some aspects to the UFO phenomenon which are negative, I think we could live with that in the same way we live with the threat from the Soviets. But when it comes to the core reasons as to why there is a cover-up, I think part of it is it could radically alter belief systems, possibly in relation to religion and concepts that worldwide religions hold dearly. If they were sort of just destroyed overnight, or at least modified, what effect would that have on mainstream religion of all different persuasions? I think that's been thought about. I think another angle is the whole issue of the technology. Let's say, for example, a particular government recovers a crashed UFO and manages to figure out the sort of technology involved. I think this could have the potential for that country or that organisation to develop technologies far beyond we've got right now, including fuel systems. Now, today, the world is dominated by the oil industry. And those figures who run the oil industry and who arguably, help control the world because it is such a huge industry, they do not want to see their grip on conventional technologies, conventional fuels lost in an instant like that.
It's their line to power.
Yeah, and I think the UFO subject offers that potential. So I wouldn't be surprised if somebody somewhere in some deeply hidden agency has figured out that, wow, yeah, we've got free energy. We've got technology that could revolutionise the world. But not only would it revolutionise the world, it would take away the grip of the people who don't want to lose that grip. So in other words, the secrecy may not be just based around, hey, somebody's visiting us. It may be dominated by the issue of, if we reveal, what are the implications going to be for those in power?
True. They don't want to lose that sense of power. It's the way that they control everything, the line of communication, the line of power, to stop wars, to create wars. I know in the executive branch, the President of the United States is also stuck in between many who actually control him. He's not really a man of great power that is controlling the decisions, I think, as much as he's almost a front man, a motivational speaker. But the real power brokers are around him that are moving the pawns and the pieces. Who are these people?
Yeah, I mean, I actually fully agree with you on that. I think when it comes to who's hiding the secrets, who's manipulating it, although a lot of people in government do know about the subject, I think the real deep secrets of the technology is hidden by what we might call like a shadow agency or a shadow government, one that operates outside of regular laws and rules, that isn't subjected to congressional oversight, that probably gets its funding through black budget type programs, and that most people within government aren't lying when they say we're not hiding anything. We really don't know what happened at Roswell. And I don't believe they're lying. What I think is that this information is so tightly held by this shadow group that, 99.9% of the people at the CIA or the NSA know nothing about it. But we assume that those are the people who would know. But if you can sort of get your mind around the concept of a group that controls all of this in a quasi outside of government situation, I think that's what we're seeing. I think that's why it's been so hard to crack the controversy wide open, because we're all knocking, or a lot of people are knocking on the doors of the Air Force saying, reveal your Roswell files.
Right.
When today's Air Force may actually not know that much more than we do, because the files and the bodies and the wreckage was siphoned off to this shadow group maybe decades ago.
Well, it's a real line of power, because reverse technology certainly exists. And I think we've seen advancements in the last 25 years that literally leave the public, political sector, the world as a mass audience stunned and amazed at how we could have gotten so far. And now I think what we're really fearing, and one of your expert research is terrorism, the ability to grasp power, the ability to grasp certain weapons that are some of even reverse technology. We have smart technology. You can almost feel like the grid is just closing in more and more and more. I understand when we're in New York or in London, your picture can be taken as much as 200 times a day just by walking around. I don't know, it kind of demoralizes us, doesn't it?
Well, it does. I mean, the world has become a strange place, and what's sort of even more disturbing is how quickly the world has changed in the last 10 years or so to where we are. And I'm not talking about individual countries, I'm talking on a worldwide basis where surveillance is sort of the name of the game. Whether it's electronic surveillance, camera surveillance, telephone surveillance. And the one thing I find most disturbing is that particularly the younger generation, nobody seems to be bothered. They just want to play with their devices and text friends and not leave the house and play like when we were kids.
Yeah.
And it's almost as if we could slip straight into a classic George Orwell type situation, not by having jackbooted soldiers banging on the front door, but just by sliding into it, by people accepting a little bit more and a little bit more in the name of security or whatever, day by day.
In the name of your safety.
Yes, and so people, in the same way, they take their shoes off at the airport. What's the next thing going to be? Everybody gets implanted and they just go along with it with a chip, because it'll make it easy. You won't need a password for your laptop, you won't need a passport. But on the other hand, you've got a chip inside you.
Slavery in the name of convenience.
Yeah, so I think the world is in danger of falling into a complete surveillance state very quickly. And I don't understand why there isn't more commentary on this on a worldwide scale, beyond just, oh, well, it could happen. But there's nothing really forceful in the media or galvanizing to get people behind. I mean, you look in the early 1970s with Watergate, a president was brought down because he bugged the Democratic office in the White House building, Watergate. And that was just the Democratic office being bugged. Today, everybody's being watched.
Absolutely.
And there's no comparison. We brought a president down 40 years ago, and today it's like, oh, well, what time's the next reality show on?
I'm amazed at how many people slept through the rollout programs of the smart meters. There are 335 million people that are in this country. In the United States, they rolled out the smart meter program where your power company came out, put a device on the side of the house that sends some personal information to a cell tower, and they say, well, this is your convenience. So 1, we don't have to send somebody out and read your meter. 2, you can also read the kilowatts that you're using on your refrigerator or your oven or whatever, thus you can save money and power. In all of my interviews, I've never found anybody that has ever read the meter themselves to find out if they saved any kilowatt power. And I said, wasn't it kind of funny that you just let somebody put a personal device on the side of your house that sends a personal signal of your personal information to a cell tower? Did no one think that this might be phase one, that yes, it is sending power, or the information of how much power is used, but the second one is, could the line be traced back into the computer so we can see what you're watching also, or see inside the house in some other way? Are you sleeping, American public?
It's our world too. It's our world too.
Well, you certainly have a lot of books, and I'm interested in the new book. Tell us about the new book.
Well, it's called Close Encounters of the Fatal Kind, and it's all about mysterious deaths within the field of ufology. Everything from researchers, investigators, authors, politicians who've got involved in the subject, pilots who've mysteriously vanished, or planes have crashed. And the reason I wrote the book is because nobody's ever really tackled the entire subject of suspicious and sinister deaths in ufology from 47 to the present day. And the more I looked into the subject, the more I found there weren't sort of 5 or 6 or a dozen cases. There were literally dozens where researchers at the height of their career, possibly when they were right on the verge of revealing something really profound that could bring some of the walls down, suddenly had out of the blue car accidents, or they suddenly decided to commit suicide, or fell from a high building, things like this. What I found most disturbing was that there were actually sort of 4 or 5 key factors present in every case, where the person literally was on the verge of revealing something. They'd uncovered something that nobody else had got. The next day they were found sitting in their car with the engine running and a hose pipe going from the exhaust through the window, or they plummeted 13 floors from a high-storey building. There were certain trends. It was almost like the deaths were being performed by someone who'd read kind of a 1 to 10 of assassination ways to kill someone and make it look like an accident, make it look like a suicide. And the book covers everybody from the assassination of John F. Kennedy, the first Secretary of Defense, James Forrestal. I cover various pilot encounters like Frederick Valentich, an Australian pilot who vanished in 1978. Literally dozens of British scientists who were working on Ronald Reagan's Star Wars program in the mid-1980s. They all died under very weird circumstances. And researchers who were, as I said, at the top of their game, no depression in their lives, no problems, then just decided to kill themselves.
Wow. Very dark, but very real.
Very real, yeah.
One of the questions that has always been arising amongst the public worldwide, and since we're here at Contact in the Desert, of course, is going back to the UFO question. You know, you're internationally acclaimed. How did you get in UFOs, of all things?
Well, I guess people who write UFO books fall into 2 categories. You have people who've had experiences and then feel galvanized to write about them.
Right.
And then there are people who, like me, who haven't had a UFO encounter, but who are fascinated by the subject for a specific reason. And the reason I got involved is my father was in the British Royal Air Force. He was a radar mechanic. And back in the 50s, he was involved in 3 UFO incidents over the course of 3 nights in September 52, where UFOs were tracked approaching the British coastline from the English Channel and the North Sea. These objects were flying at fantastic speeds and heights and doing all sorts of weird manoeuvres like left and right hand turns, reversing, hovering. Clearly in 52 nobody was flying anything that could perform like that. And so, but the first thought was, well, it's got to be the Soviets launching a sneak attack, even though common sense suggested it clearly wasn't. So fighter planes were scrambled from a nearby Air Force base. My dad was stationed at a place called Royal Air Force Neatishead on the east coast of England. The pilots reported seeing these large sort of globe-like balls of light, which clearly were under intelligent control because they would pace the aircraft, they would approach them, fly behind them, sort of play like a game of cat and mouse.
Right.
This went on for 3 nights, and then my father was brought in to see if there's any problem with the equipment, which of course there wasn't because the pilots were visually seeing the objects as well. And on the 4th day, everybody was taken into a room, reminded of the fact that they'd signed the British government's Official Secrets Act. We won't talk about this. And my dad didn't tell me till I was like 13. And that's what got me interested, not just because it was my own father, but because he was somebody trained in the military as a radar mechanic and knew the difference between, you know, a fault on the machine and intelligently controlled craft performing all sorts of weird manoeuvres. And
anomalies.
that's what got me interested, and that's why I focus more on the government files angle, because that was the one that I was sort of really exposed to in the beginning.
Have you yourself had either sighting or contact of any kind?
Well, as I've sort of gone along over the years, one of the things I have had when I'm researching the subject and writing about it is a lot of synchronicities. And I think when you have a lot of synchronicities, it pushes you in the right direction, helps you uncover information. I never ignore synchronicities. I think something is almost like channeling information to us, or channeling leads for us to follow.
Sure.
And the big issue is, do we follow those leads or not? I think it's left open to us. Some people follow the path and others don't, and the phenomenon then leaves them alone. But I've found that because I've had so many really weird synchronicities, I really do believe there's something up there, extraterrestrial, interdimensional, extra-dimensional, maybe it's a combination of all of them, but it's able to get messages to people who are looking to further their knowledge and further everybody else's knowledge. In other words, it's like when you go looking for the phenomenon realises you're looking for it, and then it interacts with you.
Right.
So, although I've not seen a definitive UFO or a literal close encounter, I do feel some sort of bond or connection with sort of like an invisible force, if you like, that is sort of partaking and passing on information.
Wow.
So,
There's the other dark side of the UFO and conspiracy and everything, and then it's Men in Black. You've researched Men in Black. This goes back to our show. We always like to expose myths and misconceptions about what they are and maybe what they're not. We're just trying to get at the truth here. Men in Black, real?
Yes, definitely real. I've written 3 books on the Men in Black because there's so much data and so many interesting theories. Now, when most people think of the Men in Black, in the general public at least, they think of Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones from the movies.
Of course.
That's the imagery. But the real Men in Black are actually very different. I would say a good 95-96% of all the reports I get are of Men in Black look very different. They're sort of generally 5 feet to 5 feet 5 tall.
Are they human?
Well, that's the big question. They're very, very pale. They have these large eyes, which they keep hidden behind wraparound sunglasses.
Right.
They wear these old-style suits and skinny black ties and fedora hats. The clothing looks like straight out.
I would wonder why bother.
Well, I think...
Wouldn't that stick out? Wouldn't that just shout, Men in Black?
Well, it would, and it actually does. But I think part of it is done to intimidate and scare the witness. If they come in the room and you knock on somebody's door and they're sort of really good cop, people don't get frightened and people don't shut up and clam up.
Right.
The witnesses I've spoken to, which is literally in the hundreds, when they've said they've been faced by these creepy little guys with skin like putty, or just overdone it with Botox is how they look.
Yes.
And they kind of shuffle in the house and stare at the person, and they're almost like a modern day vampire is how they look. Then that does create a lot of intimidation and does shut people up for years sometimes.
I believe they're real. I've had too many people report of seeing them in one form or another. I think they are non-human to a degree, or some kind of hybrid of almost of some type, as if they're trying to fit into society. I know I had on one incident, I was in Santa Cruz, California, saw a person walk right by me that was a little taller than a Man in Black and everything. And when the person just looked over at me like that, I turned away very, very quickly. It's almost like I couldn't look at their face. And the first thing I thought was, it's not human, it's not human, this can't be happening. And it was very scary. And so then I started walking quickly the other way. And I was just as walking around, I thought, I've got to look and see for myself. And I looked back and there was nothing there.
Yeah. Well, that's a typical aspect of the Men in Black mystery. They appear and they vanish very quickly. And they do seem to be like a combination of human and something non-human. But I don't think I've got even one report where the person didn't feel that the Man in Black was sort of very threatening and also disturbing in the sense it looked human, but didn't look human at the same time. It was almost like a shop window dummy, one person described the face, like an emotionless look, but also hostility in the eyes. And they found it very, very disturbing.
You know, people's beliefs, I study behavioral science, right? And people's belief systems are really interesting. When it comes to the UFO question, and they say, well, I don't really believe in UFOs, it's not so much that they don't believe in UFOs. Usually if you ask them some specific questions, you find out they don't know anything about them. So they form an opinion, of course, based on nothing. Then it comes to things like the anomalies, like extraterrestrials walking amongst humans. And I've seen it on a number of occasions of people that I know could not possibly be from here. Had the experience. When it's over, I went to go tell somebody, and it's always the typical thing of, right, Rob, okay, well, that's a great story. You know, and you can't, the mind doesn't have room for that, and that's the problem. The mind doesn't have room for that. And so, in some ways, they can filter right into society and can kind of fit in and be even amongst the public, and they know that the consciousness of us humans can't even go that far, so it actually makes it very safe for them.
And I think because they do look sort of semi-human, if you were to sort of see them late at night or in a crowd, people are busy running around, you probably wouldn't notice too much, unless you really looked at them closely. You might just walk on by if you didn't get a good look at them. And I think this is sort of more evidence of this whole idea of infiltration. Maybe the black sunglasses and the hat are designed as a bit of camouflage so that you really don't get to, what's the issue with the guy's eyes. And it's kind of scary if you think about it, like a slow infiltration of society. Now, I wouldn't want people to think that the entire phenomenon is negative, because it's clearly not. But I think it's like in our race, there are good people, there are bad people. We're all capable of doing terrible things, but most of us know why we shouldn't do that. Commit murder or whatever. So, but I think there are positive entities that want to help us, but I also think there are negative entities that basically just hate us, and it's almost like there's an invisible war going on, possibly even for sort of the control of humanity even.
Wow. Well, there you have it. Nick Redfern, that's incredible information. The light side, the dark side, something for everybody. We're right here at the Perala Report. We're reporting from Contact in the Desert. We'll be looking forward to seeing much more of Nick Redfern. And where can we find you at your website? nickredfern14.blogspot.com. And you can also see us at theperalreport.com. Nick, thanks so much for being on our
Thanks,
show.
Robert. Thanks
You saw the truth, and we'll be back real soon. See you at the Perala Report.
It's our world too.